My name is David. I've run my own businesses for over 35 years. Unemployment and underemployment in the blind community is a huge problem. From I Can't See You, this is Blind Bosses, focusing on the people of the blind community who are getting the job done. Hello there, and welcome to Blind Bosses, presented by I Can't See You. Blind Bosses is a very different podcast than my normal I Can't See You podcast. In Blind Bosses, I hope to showcase and focus on folks within the blind community who are getting the job done. Now, when I first came up with the idea, I was only going to do blind folks who ran their own businesses. And I thought that might be difficult to get a lot of people week in and week out, ha ha ha. And I'm laughing because I haven't been able to do week in and week out. I want to focus on folks who are getting the job done within their field, whether they're a business owner, a lawyer, or a doctor. Any of those folks I want to have on to show blind folks and to show the sighted world that just because someone is blind or visually impaired, it doesn't mean they can't get the job done. In today's first episode, I talked to Aaron Spelker from Mobile Accessible Games. And what Aaron found when he first lost his sight, and you've got to listen to that story because it was a very freak incident that caused him to lose his sight. What he found was that there weren't video game reviews for these accessible games. There was a list of accessible games, but no reviews. So let's get to Aaron Spelker from Mobile Accessible Games. Aaron, thanks so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So before we get into the game reviews, what I'd love to find out is what happened. What's your vision loss journey? What happened one day you saw, then you had some sort of accident? Is that what I understand?
Yes. Yeah. So my vision story is I was a sighted person for all my life up until 3 years ago. And I had, what I call an accident, but it's kind of a freak thing. I was down in Cancun with my wife for our 20-year wedding anniversary. And on one of the first days, we went down to the beach and a big gust of wind blew sand all up into my face and into my eyes. And, my eyes were kind of like scratched and irritated for the rest of the vacation. But I guess it had introduced a very strong bacteria into my eyes. And so by the time I got back to the United States, I had a massive infection in both of my eyes. And I ended up here in Boston at the hospital, Tufts Medical Hospital, for 3.5 weeks as they tried to fight off the infection and, save the eyes, because they didn't know if it was going to kind of, move the infection move beyond the eyes. If it looked like that, they were going to have to remove my eyeballs. But they were able to, after 3.5 weeks, fight off the infection. But by that time, just pretty much everything in my eyes was either damaged by the infection or damaged by the medicine that fought the infection. So I came out, went in fully sighted and came out with light perception is pretty much what I have now.
Wow. That, as someone who is hoping to one day live near a beach, that kind of scares me off a little bit. Yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel better, 2 years later, me and my wife and my 2 kids went back to Cancun to the beach and had a very nice family vacation. So, Cancun was great. And,
okay.
The sand in the eyes, not so great, but
okay.
Cancun itself was a great time. So
I would say that's a pretty freak incident when you say,
yes,
it doesn't happen a lot.
Freak accident, freak incident. Yeah, it's a 1 in a million shot. So, so it's very, very interesting to so suddenly go from, sighted, working to blind, and what the heck do I do with my life? What just happened to me?
Right.
It was a very shocking set of events.
And what kind of work did you do before that incident?
Yeah, I owned I owned and then co-owned a financial services company. So we helped other corporations set up their retirement plans, like their pension plans,
okay,
401k, 403b plans, and then work with employees on their retirement planning and strategy. So I had that business up until my accident, and then with the accident, I sold my half of the business to my partner, and then kind of figured out, what am I doing now as a blind person? So that's been my exploration for the last 3 years, is kind of moving from a sighted world to a blind world, and it's been interesting. And I would say it's gone smoother. Probably after the first year, where I decided to accept that I am blind and kind of more engaged with a blind world and the blind resources and the blind technology, as opposed to holding on to, oh, this used to be so easy when I was sighted, kind of mentality.
Right.
But it took a little while. It took a little processing there, and definitely the first 3 to 5 months was pretty rough, and then after that it eased up some, and now it's this is just my new reality, and it's just life in a different way.
Right. And that seems to be one of the things that happens to folks who are sighted for during their life, and then all of a sudden there's a shocking difference like that. I know some of my friends have had issues where they've gone and just spent a year just being depressed and not wanting to do anything and not knowing what to do. So after that time, so what did you do? Did you go and get services? Did you go and learn any kind of you had mentioned assistive technology? Did you learn JAWS or voiceover? What pulled me out of my funk, so I in my preparation to go off to do training, so they have a place called the Carroll Center for the Blind in Massachusetts, where they do technology training, and they also do like residential living, where you actually live there for 6 months, and they teach you how to do everything. Okay.
So in preparation for a kind of intensive tech class, that was like a 2-week tech class, I had a individual from the IT department of the Mass Commission for the Blind, come to my house, and he loaded JAWS onto my computer, and and kind of going through that and setting it all up, I realized that the guy that was doing all that for me was visually impaired in some way, and I kind of got into conversation with him. So this is just 3 or 4 months after I was blind, and I got a conversation with him, and I was like, oh, I can tell you're visually impaired. Just out of curiosity, how much vision do you have to be able to go on the internet and download these software and load profiles on my computer? And he said he was born blind. He's never seen anything, not even light perception. And so that was kind of like the turn for me, where I said, this guy's able to do it. He's been able to, never seen anything. He's, working a computer and, holding down a job. And, I should kind of, get off the couch and, start exploring, how to navigate in this new world. And, the next kind of step I took, because the training wasn't for a couple months after that, when he loaded on my computer, he showed me, okay, here's how you do Word, and here's how you surf the internet. And I had, kind of started on the side just for fun, a concept for a book idea that I had thought up about 5 years earlier. So I decided to sit down in the months following and start writing that book, which taught me how to use JAWS and taught me how to surf the internet for research and stuff like that. And so I spent the rest of 2019, the year I went blind, writing a book, which I ended up, self-publishing and releasing, which just gave me a real sense of accomplishment. At the end, I was like, oh, look, I was blind and I accomplished writing a 436-page book, that I'm really happy with. So, that kind of helped me really launch off in a really more positive frame of mind than kind of where I started 2019, shortly, in February when I had the accident and went blind.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that when someone is blind, whether born blind, and I guess it's a little bit different. If you're born blind or you've lost your vision as a young child, it's a little bit different because you kind of figure it out then. Your parents take you to a place and they say, okay, well, now you can go to school with these folks, and you kind of learn all that. But when you're a sighted working adult, it just becomes, you kind of think, hey, I can't do this and I can't do that. But then you go to see others. And it happened for me when I went and joined the NFB, and we went around the table, one of the first meetings I was at, and everybody said what they did for work. And one girl said, hey, I work at the IRS. Another one said, I'm a school teacher and I said, of blind kids? No, they're sighted. And I said, okay. And then somebody else went around, and one guy worked at a supermarket, and I'm thinking, oh, they do all this. Well, then, like you thought when you had the guy come to your house, if that guy can do it, then I obviously have a shot at being able to do it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's not like somebody said, well, you can't be a chemical engineer if you're blind. If you had training, whether you were sighted when you had the training or you were blind when you had the training for being a chemical engineer, you could still do that, obviously just in a different way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. First off, in those early days, I didn't know what was available for technology. So I was just like, well, I'll never use a computer again. How do you do that? I didn't even know there was a JAWS existence. I did know that there was voiceover on the iPhone.
Okay.
Because I had a couple of years earlier on a train ride home, sat next to a person who was blind, and he was doing voiceover on the phone. And I just ended up in a conversation with him. I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. How's that work?" And we talked for the whole train ride home from Boston to the suburbs where I live. Talking about voiceover and how it works. And he was kind of just showing it to me. And so when I was in the hospital for the 3.5 weeks, I was like, "Oh, I remember this. There was that blind guy I met, and there was his phone talked to him. How do you do that?" And I got, when my wife was visiting, we figured out how to turn it on. And then I just spent 3.5 weeks while I was sitting in the hospital, just flicking my finger in different directions until stuff happened on my phone and kind of self-taught myself over those, 3.5 weeks. So, I mean, by the end I was answering work emails. I was watching Netflix. I was, doing all the stuff that I could do today, just out of necessity and boredom, sitting around in the hospital for 3.5 weeks.
Well, it's great that you found that while you were there, because obviously that's something that you're not really doing anything else. And so, were you able to get the audio description to work on the Netflix when you got that on?
Yep.
Awesome.
Figured out how to do that, and
okay.
I mean, so the nature of the infection that I had, they had to give me topical steroids and antibiotics every hour, 24 hours a day for 3.5 weeks.
God.
And so there was never a time that I was asleep more than 59 minutes. And so I was awake for a lot of time, and awake a lot of random times. 3 a.m. I'm suddenly awake because they just woke me up to put this medicine in. So yeah, I just spent a lot of time figuring out, and came out of the hospital pretty adept. I mean, I've learned tricks since then, meeting other blind people, and they're like, "Oh, did you know you can just 4-finger tap at the top of the screen and it takes you right up to the top?" I'm like, "Oh no, I had no idea." All right, excellent. I just kept 3-finger swiping over and over and over again until I got to the top.
Right.
So there's some stuff that people showed me that has made things smoother and easier since I left there. But I was doing pretty well while I was doing it on my own in the hospital.
Right, and I think that's again, like you were saying, when you get around other folks. Everybody comes from a different background, but when you have that shared experience of the blind folks being with other blind people, sometimes when somebody goes blind, they may have never ever even encountered another blind person up until the time they've lost their vision, and it's just something that they're like, wow, okay, now I see how you do that. And that's one thing on the other podcast that I do, White Canes Connect. We always ask for people if you have tips or tricks, because sometimes somebody might do something that no one else has thought, hey, I could try that, and then it work. And
the amount that I learned, so I did my second year or so being blind. I went back to the Carroll Center for like an advanced computer class. So the first one I went was like a 2-week crash course, and then I went back for some advanced training, and centered around web accessibility, but it was a lot more intense. Working on all aspects of Excel and Word and internet and things like that. But I was in that class, that 7-week class, with a bunch of professionals. So these were blind people who were holding down jobs, at the state, or were lawyers, or work for the BARD and things like that. So real professionals, knew what they were doing, well versed. Blind most of them through life, but the amount that I learned over the 7-week class from the class was about equal to what I learned just from those other students who were in there, who were like, do you know about this? Do you know about that? And just hooked me up to all sorts of things that I wasn't aware of, like Bookshare. I didn't know, I can do Bookshare, I can do Bard. I had no idea. Okay, that's great. Just so many things that they tuned me into, that just has made my life just, more enriching and easier, just from the tips and tricks that they've given me through the course of that 7 weeks that we were together.
Yeah, and just for listeners who may not know, Bard and Bookshare are a way to get books. Sometimes they're audiobooks, sometimes it's just text to speech, but enables folks like us to enable us to read books that otherwise that may not be available as an audiobook yet. It just makes, again, like Aaron said, just makes life a lot easier and allows us to just do more with
and
what
if
we've
you
got.
show your legal blindness, all of it's for free to you as well. So
Right. Yeah. I think I kind of think it depends state by state, but I know it's free for me here in Pennsylvania and
free for me in Massachusetts.
yeah, and I know New York is the same way. You really took it a lot quicker, it seems. And when I read the story about you've only been blind about three plus years, you've advanced a lot further than a lot of people have. Sometimes it takes a person, like I said earlier, they spend a year just trying to figure out, hey, what am I going to do? This is all bad. My life is over, and so forth and so on. So you kind of really got going, and that is really commendable. So
I don't do well being idle. I do not. I mean, and that's actually. I mean, I do put a lot on it. Of in the beginning, that first year, I didn't really know how to do much, but I knew enough to after the person from the Mass Commission for the Blind. I knew enough to work in Word. And so that allowed me to 4 to 6 hours a day. I just spent writing the book that I wrote, which really just kept me from being idle and kept me from, thinking about, being sad or depressed about it. And just, each day like, well, I wrote a chapter today, or I, got this scene out that I was struggling with, it was always like every day was a little bit of accomplishment that I could be, positive about, as opposed to the other way around.
And while we're talking about the book again, tell me the name of it.
So it's called The Bubonic Reorder. It is ironically, a story that I wrote in 2019, which was about a global SARS pandemic that strikes in the year 2020. So
maybe it wasn't in China or any place else that this, maybe you actually either saw it coming or you developed it.
Well, it's funny. So I came up with the idea about 5 years earlier. And so in 2014, I had come up with the idea. I'd spent 5 years just kind of in free time working on it and thinking about scenes and outlining some stuff and doing a lot of research. And, the research really led to me of, when a pandemic happens, this is how it's going to happen, which was very much how COVID-19 happened. And it's most likely going to be one of these viruses. And the top of the list was SARS. So, the story that I wrote that, I finished about 3 months before COVID hit, was not me being Nostradamus and just, picking it out of nowhere. It's just through a lot of research and the scientists just saying, a global pandemic is going to happen. It's going to happen like this. It's most likely going to come from this location, and it's most likely going to be one of these 3 diseases. And they spelled it out and knew about it, in research papers I was reading 5 years before COVID ever happened. So,
wow.
I don't think too many people who were scientists in that field were all that surprised.
Right, knowing sooner or later something was going to come along. So, where is the book available?
It's on Amazon. You can get the print version as well as electronic version. Barnes and Noble. I think it's on some other sites. I think I saw it out on Target. I also donated it to Bookshare. So if you have a Bookshare account, you can go download it for free. That's my little give back to the blind community. And I am in hopes. There's a big backlog at the Bard recording studio. I'm hoping that one day it will be turned into a Bard audiobook, but I know they're way behind because of COVID.
Okay. Yeah. And I will link to the Amazon version on the in the show notes. So if you want to check it out, it'll be linked below. And again, that'll be an affiliate link. So if you do buy it, Aaron thanks you and I thank you as well.
Leave a review too. Very important. Even if you feel free to, if you have a Bookshare account, download it for free. I'd love for you to even have it for free. But please, if you can go to Amazon and leave a review, reviews are very, very important. So the more reviews you have, the more views it shows up on other, if you like this book, you might like this book. So please take the time to review. That's always very helpful.
The main reason why you're here is one of the things that you do, or the main thing that you do right now, is review video games, accessible video games that are available on mobile devices. And what led you to start doing that?
Yeah, I mean, so in those early days, while I sat sad and depressed, I was looking for a distraction. And all my life as a sighted person, a distraction would be, sit down and play a video game, get lost in a Fallout or a Skyrim, on the PlayStation or Xbox. And, that would be kind of my distraction thing that I did. So when I went blind, I was like, all right, well, what games are there available for blind people? And I kind of struggled at first trying to find, I just kind of thought there would be a master list. You go to the internet, and here's the list of all games that are accessible on the iPhone for blind people, or here's a category you can filter on. And I really wasn't finding that. I eventually kind of stumbled on AppleVis, which is great. It has a list of a lot of games. The issue was it wasn't really telling me much about that game. So it would say, here's the game. It is accessible. Maybe if you read some of the comments, you'd see what some people mentioned about it, but it wasn't like a full game review about the game. What is it? Is it fun? Here's where, it does well or doesn't do well on accessibility. So I wasn't finding a master list of accessible game reviews of accessible games for mobile phones. And after, kind of grumbling to myself over several weeks of, I can't believe there's, this list doesn't exist. Where is this list? Why can't I find this list? I finally said, well, maybe I should be the one who starts creating this list. And so that's what I started doing. I started, playing a game and reviewing it. And at first just started posting it out onto, blind support groups out on Facebook. And then I decided, well, you know what, maybe I'll just make a dedicated Facebook group because, this is going to be the same problem. It's scattered all over the place. How's anyone going to find these game reviews? Let me create a Facebook group where there's one spot people can go. They can see all the reviews. It'll be easy for them to find. So that's when I started my group, which is currently called Mobile Accessible Games. And it is on Facebook as a Facebook group. And then I also have a Twitter account and I do YouTube videos where it's kind of connected to that, where I interview game developers as well as accessibility influencers and advocates around the state of mobile accessible gaming. And that's my YouTube group.
And as we were talking before we hit record, I think that's one thing where the blind community kind of suffers. We're just happy if somebody has a list of, hey, these are the websites that are accessible, or these are the apps that are accessible. And once you have that list, it doesn't matter, and nobody cares what, hey, it's accessible, I can go do it. You took it a step further by doing the reviews. So again, bringing the whole thing back to fitting in more with the sighted community, where not only do they see, hey, these games are available, but here are some reviews. Now the blind community has it as well. And I just think it's an outstanding idea.
The other thing along with that too is, and I understand this mentality, a lot of the blind community, like playing free games because many games aren't accessible. So I don't want to go pay for a game to find out I just can't play it, right? So I'm taking the bullet for them, and I'll pay for a game that I think is accessible, and I will play it and, then give a review on its accessibility. So if you see a game that I've reviewed of the 110 games so far that I've reviewed, that's a game that you can play. It might cost you money, but at least you're not, spending money to find out, it wasn't accessible. I just wasted $5 of my hard-earned money. If you picked a game off my list, that was a game that was accessible and you can play it.
Do other folks come in and say, hey, I've checked this game out, and then you go take a look? Do you ever get community input like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to source games from wherever I can find them. So I'm constantly scouring the internet. I am looking at AppleVis, and then people do come in and say, oh, I just found this game. It seems like it's pretty accessible. And I will add that to my list of, here's, I have a very long list of games that I try to get through. So that those ones that people mention, I throw up on the list and then, eventually get around to it and review it. And then if it seems to be getting a lot of traction in the group, like people are starting to talk a lot about some game that I haven't played, I might move it up on the list to review it sooner rather than later because people seem to be talking about it. So let me let them know what I think of it and all the, testing that I've done about it around accessibility.
Okay. And how about with games? You see a game and you say, I'm not really into that type of game, but you still review it anyway. Does that make it more difficult when you do it, or do you not really do one?
Yeah, I mean, it's different. So I don't play games just for fun like I would if I was just doing it for myself, right? I kind of right from the beginning said, look, I like certain type of games, but I know other people like other types of games that maybe are not my cup of tea per se. But I am going to make sure that I find games that are accessible in that genre, and I'm going to be sure to play them, and I'm going to be put myself in the foot of somebody who, this is their type of game. Would they enjoy this? Is it accessible? Where does it have shortcomings? And here's how you get around it. So I think I have over 20 different game genres, from role-playing games to board games to card games to first-person shooters to strategy games, to real-time strategy games, to business simulation games. I mean, just a whole gambit of different types. I think there's over 20 types now. And I'm always excited to find something that is in a genre I haven't reviewed before, because that just means, there's somebody out there who is looking for that type of game. And now I've given them an accessible version that they can play and let them know about it. So I'll play anything in any genre and try to give it a fair shake, whether it's a game I would gravitate to on my own or not.
Has it ever felt like a job though for you as you review the games, because it's not, again, might not be your cup of tea, like you say? Does that make it more difficult to get excited to do it, or are you excited to do it because a lot of folks are going to see it and see the review and say, oh, that sounds good, I'm going to try that?
Yeah, I think it, as you exactly stated, it's a little shift of perspective, right? It is there a lot more of the joy of, I'm reviewing this game and I'm going to put it out there and someone's going to find it and say, this is my favorite game. And I've been noticing that in the voting, where some people have voted for, oh, this is my game of the year. I'm like, that one? Oh my gosh. Okay. That's not anywhere close to what I would have picked, but it takes all types of people to make the world go round, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of excitement from that standpoint. There is where, there's games that I eventually like, oh, I'm really enjoying this, but I kind of have to move on. I got to let this one go because I have 3 other games that I have to review, to keep on pace to, put out one a week, which is what I try to do. So, you kind of don't, you kind of have to let a game that you think is great. Like Swordy Quest, I thought it was a great game. If I wasn't doing this, I'd probably just still be playing it, but I just don't have time to put in something that's so time consuming on a game like that. That's a type of game that you really got to play over a course of months to really see all the parts and then write a good review about it. So it takes a lot of time. And now that I've moved that off, I've replaced that with another game that I'm playing that took several months to play. And then there's other ones that I can play over the course of a week or two and get through it. There's some that you can play in 3 days and kind of see everything that you need to see to be able to write a review. So I constantly have 3 or 4 games going now at the same time. And I'm also so I take off the month of December from writing new reviews, or I should say releasing new reviews. And December is a big month where I kind of get caught back up, where I'll have 20 game reviews ready to release, starting January 1st. So I have like the first 20 weeks of the year kind of covered already, and then I could spend that 20 weeks reviewing the next 15 or 20 games. So by the time I get to December, I'm just about out of games, and have nothing, no reserve. But I spend December really trying to plow through a lot of games to get stocked back up. And that's usually great. I mean, sometimes it comes back and bites me, because sometimes, you review a game in December and you're like, all right, I'm going to release this on March 1st. And then you go to release it on March 1st and the game's been removed from the App Store. And so you spend a lot of time, playing the game or reviewing it, and now it's not there and available for people. So that's kind of a thing that I save for December is, here's the games that I reviewed that you never got to see. So it's kind of like the, what they get in December is, what could have been if I had gotten this review out a little quicker before it got pulled from the store. So.
And when you're playing the games, are you taking notes? Or are you just kind of making mental notes? How do you handle that?
It's kind of both. If I'm just at my home, I try to sit in my office at my computer so that I can jot down notes kind of as I go. Like if you're playing something that's really story driven, you're like, oh, I gotta kind of, this is a main character. I gotta know what his name is, how to spell it. Let me write that down in the, some bullet points as I start to develop the review. But other times I'm just, out at a doctor's office and I'll be playing and, I'll just come back later and, fill it out. But I probably always try to start sitting at my computer, because there's things at the beginning that you want to get jotted down, because you might not see them again. You know what I mean?
Okay. Right.
So I try not to do that where like, oh, what happened at the beginning of the story? I forget. I should have written that down. So I've kind of learned to start sitting at the computer and jotting down notes.
Okay. And so I'm guessing some games you're playing, the ones that you're saying you're playing for months, I'm guessing you're playing hours and hours and hours of a game like that.
Yeah.
But some games that you only play a couple of weeks, is it an hour or two a day? How many hours a day are you playing games, do you think?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Probably 4 hours, I would say. I was playing this game that I'm going to be dropping at the beginning of January. That game alone, a big game. I mean, I played it for 6 or 7 months, and really, to be able to unlock everything that's available in the game. I was playing that alone about 2 hours a day, and then I played other games in between. Those 1 week games, those games that you can play over 3 days, and do it. So, yeah, probably, minimum 2, probably maximum 4 hours a day.
Okay. And you told me what you did before the incident. Do you have a day job now?
So not quite. I will actually be starting in January doing some volunteer work for the Mass Commission for the Blind, doing accessibility training of new people who are blind on how to use the iPhone.
Okay.
So I'll be doing that a couple days a week, starting in January. That's kind of a part-time job, if you will, but it's actually volunteer. I'm volunteering to do it.
Right. It seems like there's plenty of volunteer positions available for things like that. I know within my area here, a lot of stuff like that going on where you always able to help folks out. And that's you're not getting paid in money, but you're getting paid in the satisfaction of helping somebody hopefully come from a dark place, both literally and figuratively, and helping them see that, hey, life isn't over because you can't see anymore.
Right, exactly.
And it's helpful. So, all right. So tell me, you've got a YouTube channel. The people that you're interviewing, are the developers, are these folks also blind, or are they just developers and thought, hey, it'd be nice if we could have blind folks be able to play too, so let's make it accessible? How does that usually break down?
Yeah, it's actually both. So the interview series that I started probably about a year after I started the group, and it really came out of, as I was doing reviews, I was reaching out to developers and being, oh, I have this question, this isn't accessible. Am I just doing something wrong? Writing a review. Can you give me some more information? Or, I was just, over the course of the first year, just asking a lot of questions to game developers. And that ended up to some interesting exchanges, over email, or, even on the, they would give me a call and we would talk on the phone. I was like, these are really fascinating conversations. But I'm the only one who's getting to hear them. So I decided to turn those into starting to interview the developers formally. I started kind of print interviews where I sent them a series of questions and they answered them. And then I turned that to do actually YouTube video interviews with them to kind of bring the conversation around accessibility and what does it take to make an accessible game to the blind community, and also to kind of humanize, I guess, that it's not this big corporation who's creating your favorite game. It's usually, 1 or 2 people who are spending, from 9 o'clock to 1 a.m. after they put their kids to bed after their full-time job, trying to create this game for you and add in the accessibility and make it so that everybody can play. And so I wanted to make sure that people understood that, there's a real life person behind this and they're working really hard. And, let's encourage, if you do like their game, make sure to review it, make sure to be willing to pay for it, because that helps them create the next game that you're going to love playing. So I wanted to, get that kind of connection between the community and the actual game developer started. And then through that course, eventually I started meeting other people like myself who were doing some sort of game accessibility or advocacy. And I started interviewing them as well about, their YouTube channels and their channel that's doing, blind accessibility walkthroughs of various games, or, their, some advocate who's gone to the game accessibility conference and has, led a panel about accessible gaming. I wanted to talk to those people. So, and again, all to just kind of bring information and insight, to the blind or visually impaired gamer around what is happening in the state of accessible gaming, and what work people are putting in on their behalf, and make sure that they were informed and educated about that.
Okay, and and I'm guessing that's what you mean with the influencers, as far as the other folks that are doing YouTube,
YouTubes and podcasts and things like that.
When you are doing all this, so you have only light perception. I'm assuming you're using the camera on your computer to do the video. Is that okay?
Yep.
And
that's awesome.
Okay, and do you have somebody take a look to make sure, hey, you only see your chin and your chest, or you've got it kind of set? It's not something that could really change that much.
I hope so. I have it positioned, and hopefully I'm in camera. My cleaners do come through and sometimes jostle it around, and I try to put it back.
Right. Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if the top of my head is cut off, or or the bottom of my mouth is cut off. But
okay.
My community, I think, is mostly visually impaired, so hopefully they don't mind too much.
Right.
But I always say, as opposed to just having it, the camera off and, it just being a black screen that they're looking at, I at least throw myself up there. So at least if there is somebody who's sighted, at least they get to look at something.
It's just you doing all this. Is that correct? No one else? You don't have a virtual assistant or an actual assistant?
It's just me. Like I said, this is very much a, hobby, if you will, for me, to, just put it out there, give me something to do, give me something positive, something I can give back. Again, a thing, I think gaming is a great way to distract your mind and give you joy. And, I want people to realize that, there's more than just text adventure games and Dice World for them to play, which are great games, but, there's more out there. There's a whole bunch of different types of games. So I really want to expose people to a whole genre and a whole variety of games that are out there and available to them. And it's just kind of, I look at it as my way of, giving back and making it just that much easier for, the Aaron who suffers some freak accident and finds themselves in the exact same position I am. I want that to be easy for them.
Would you consider, if you could make it a business, would you make it a business?
I don't know. I have, I'd rather just kind of do it for free for people. The monetizing seems like a lot of work, and
because it's just that when I was looking at everything over the last few days, I'm thinking, if he had a website and he then built a mailing list and with affiliate marketing and everything else, so much could be done. And again, it really wouldn't be, unless somebody bought something through an affiliate link. You're not charging folks for it, and obviously there's paid routes that way as well. Right. But I just saw so much potential for it, and again, growing your Facebook group up to 1,700 or so folks in a fairly short amount of time. I think it's just something. And I got to be honest with you, when you first approached me and I saw that you had this Facebook group, I'm like, he doesn't have a website, it doesn't look like. And what if Facebook went away? What if, or they, for whatever reason, they shut you down? Somebody said something funny, or somebody said you said something funny, or whatever, or somebody, you wrote a review for a game and the game company said, we don't agree with that, and went to Facebook and said this is wrong and shut him down. And then what would happen? You kind of lose your community. Whereas if you had the website and you had the mailing list, at least you'd still be able to talk to folks and contact folks and be in contact with them. So just some things that I had thought of as I also put in the outline.
I have thought of that as well. Again, it gets kind of into how easy is that? I'm very into easy, as you can tell.
Right.
Because I want to spend more time on, putting out reviews every week. Like if it was like, now I'm going to manage a website and that means I can only do a review every other week. I'd rather do a review every week. I have a big Word document that's something like 200 pages now that is just, all the game reviews. So, if I had to switch over to a website, I could, still put out all the interviews on there. And again, for monetizing things like I just for free, write for pocketgamer.com around accessibility. So I have like I think 5 articles out there for them. That's all around, features about blind game developers, or, some new accessible game that's coming out that is for the blind community, or, interviewing the head of the game accessibility conference. So, just again, I'm all kind of about just sharing, what I've learned with other people so that they find great games and that it's not as hard for them to find all these things like it was for me. So I do it more for the love of it than, looking to make any money off of it.
As far as the gaming goes, are there any games that you've heard about that maybe aren't out yet that you're excited for? Is there something on the horizon that you're really looking forward to checking out and reviewing, or at least playing and then reviewing?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many games I have recently played that I've really enjoyed. There is the ironically a text adventure game. Usually I kind of steer away from text adventure games because there's so many of them, and I want to show people other things. But there is this trilogy that is called the first game is called Sabers of Infinity. The second one is Guns of Infinity, and then coming out in March, it's going to be Lords of Infinity, which just is kind of like it's text adventure based, but it's basically you being starting off as a soldier up to running a whole army to becoming the lord of a land, and it's kind of living this 20-year life and building up a character to your how you've played the game, and it's just a really well written story, really excellent complex world, and I would say that's for me. I'm really kind of interested to see the next installment of, the third installment of that particular game series.
How about sports games? Are there many accessible sports games?
They tend to be more like the sports manager, like you're the coach, you're the team owner.
Gotcha.
And, there's one of my favorite games. There's only 3 games that I've given an A+ at the reviews that I've done. And one of them is a game called Football Chairman Pro, which is you are the owner of a soccer team, and you start off with in the lowest league of the UK soccer leagues, and you bring that team as far as you can, hopefully all the way up to the Premier League and winning the championship. And you buy and sell trade players, and you train them up, and you have to manage your stadium and your concessions, and it's just a very kind of complex sports management game, in which I really, really love. I'm still holding out for a great simulation game for baseball, which again, it really just irks me that, here's the sport that is most accessible for the blind community, and yet we don't have a great blind accessible baseball game, which just is very frustrating to me. So I'm hoping someone like Out of the Park Baseball, who makes an excellent simulation baseball game, but is unfortunately not accessible. I hope they eventually hear enough from the community to decide to add accessibility into their game, because that is a superb baseball simulation game, and I would love to be able to play that from an accessibility standpoint. And I've played that for many, many years as a sighted person, and having played a lot of games and thought about accessibility, I really don't see a reason why it couldn't be accessible from a structural standpoint. Coding standpoint might be a little different on how they built it, but conceptually it should be able to be accessible.
Back when I was a kid, I was in high school, and I still had enough vision in my good eye that I was able to play. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the handheld electronic games. There was a football game, which were basically like hyphens that you're running hyphens through.
I remember that one. It was a green little red dots. Yeah.
Right. The little red dots running down the field. Yeah. I had a game that was a baseball game that in May of 1980, I had surgery on my good eye, on my left eye, and I couldn't see for about a week. Whether I could see or not, I had a patch. So I don't remember if I had vision or if I didn't have vision, but I had a patch and a shield over it for that time. So I couldn't do anything. And I asked my mom, I said, "Oh, would you bring that baseball game in?" And it was much larger than that Mattel football game. And I want to say this game was by Coleco, but it was awesome because I could play it. It had, every time a pitch came, if it was a fastball, it'd go beep, 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 beep. If it was a curveball, you could hear it. It would make a funnier sound as the curve was breaking. And so I couldn't see what was happening, whether I hit a single, double, triple. Homer made a funny sound. So I knew, but I spent hours playing that, wondering, again, not knowing how many runs I scored, if I won or lost. But at least I was able to play and hit the ball and, and carry through with that.
And if I remember that one, it was the actual console was shaped like a baseball's field, right? It was kind of like curved at the top.
Yeah, it had the screen itself it was, I kind of think the thing was more like a rectangle, with the field did have the foul lines, on the angles. That part looked like the field, but I don't remember the game itself. I thought the game was like a very dark red or a brown plastic. I know there was another game out like that, but I don't, the one I had was not like that. It was a rectangle and it was very easy. It kind of it was the size of like an iPad. I just know it was a lot of fun and enabled me. And I didn't think twice about it because I assumed that even though I had limited sight before the surgery, I assumed that I was going to still have some limited sight after, and I'd be able to play this game to see it well enough then once I healed up enough that that I'd be able to play. And at that point I was. And I have to tell you that Football Chairman Pro I'm going to look for as soon as we get done. I mean, it's right up my alley. I mean, it's so fun. I love the Premier League. I obviously with the World Cup just ending, just everything that you mentioned, and Ted Lasso starting soon. Everything is just how it sounds.
I mentioned Ted Lasso in my game review.
Oh, did you really?
So that one I had downloaded. That was towards the beginning. I think it's like the 13th or 15th game I reviewed. So it's very early on. I have 110 game reviews now, and so I went and got a guide dog from the CNI in New Jersey during COVID. And I had to quarantine at a hotel for 2 weeks and not leave the room. And so I'm like, all right, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to download a bunch of games and I will, play 5 or 10 games over the course of these 2 weeks. And I'll have a whole bunch of game reviews to play or to release. I played Football Chairman Pro for the entire 2 weeks. That's just what I did. I had nothing else to do. I played literally, usually I'm telling you, I'm 2 to 4. I played 8 hours a day, just playing Football Chairman Pro for 2 weeks. And I felt a little ashamed of myself that I was like, I was going to get so much done. And I just played this one game. But it earned itself an A+ for me because it was so captivating. I was so into it. And a really smooth interface and conveying a lot of information, lots of stats to cover about the players and the stadium and things like that. So, I loved everything about that game. So,
okay. Well, that makes me a little bit nervous because if I start playing that, is that how,
it's hard
I should be doing this, but I'll just play this for a little while.
At least for me, it was very much, like drugs. I kept coming back to it. I'm like, I'm going to stop now, but let me just play one more game. And that turned into a whole season, and so I just kept going.
I mean, it kind of sounds like, as listeners to this podcast know, huge into fantasy football and huge into following all that along. And of course, I'll mention again, if you want to look at that video that from the All Blind Fantasy Draft from last season, ican'tseeyou.com/football. I always feel obligated to mention that. And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, doing something a little above and beyond worrying about if this guy's hurt, this real guy is hurt. You've got to worry about in that. I'm guessing you've got to worry about injuries and things like that. And
players starting to get old and their skills are on the downside instead of increasing. And then you've fallen in love with that character because they've been on your team for 5 or 6 years. But like, okay, when do I cut them loose as opposed to hold on to them just because I've fallen in love with the player? And
right. So now it sounds like you're talking about Roy.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun.
We'll put some links to these in the show notes and have those so you can go check those out. And I'm guessing all are available in the App Store at least at this point. Is that one's still available?
Well, Football Chairman Pro is definitely there. I know over time, some games that I have reviewed are now no longer available, which hopefully people have downloaded them. But I think everything we've talked about today, yes, is still out there.
Right. Okay. And is that one a free one or is that one a paid?
So you have I think they give you 30 years where you can play for free, 20 seasons.
Okay.
And then if you want to keep going, then it's $2.99, I think.
Okay.
So very reasonable. I paid for the whole thing. I had some 100 years dynasty that
It's one thing when you talk about, sometimes you have the different, I know seeing the bills from my wife and my daughter playing the games and the 99-cent power up or in-game purchase. When you're talking about $2.99 to buy a game that obviously gives you hours and hours of joy, not really huge on the, when you think back to, you were talking about Xbox and PlayStation earlier, $50 or $60 a game for those. But so again, not huge and easily doable for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, I really like, and I always give developers advice, particularly in the space of just like, with the blind community, we want to just make sure it's going to work. So giving some seasons for free, and then have after 20 seasons, now you have to pay. Well, I should know whether I like it, and I know whether it's accessible. And at that point, if I like your game, I should, definitely pay you for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I always, when I'm playing a game too and reviewing it, I will not pay for the microtransactions because I want to see, what they experience. Most of the people who are going to play from my community, because most of them, are on, some sort of fixed income usually. So I don't want it to be like, oh, it was really fun as long as I paid the, $20 of microtransactions.
Right.
That's not the really experience they're going to have. So I try not to do that, so that I can, kind of review the experience that they're going to have as they play it.
Whether it's an app or something else, that's always the first thing in my mind. Am I going to buy this and then not be able to use it? The recorder that I mentioned, the Zoom H1N, it's very difficult. And I have a little bit of sight, but it's very difficult to know if I've even hit the record button. So I have no idea if it's running. And I know at some point in time, I'm going to record something and think, oh, this is great. I got this. And when I get back and I try to get it, and I'm like, hey, where is it?
I spent, well, again, because I think there's two different things between accessible and functional, right? So something can be accessible, but it's not really functional to play, right? Yes, I can get to everything if I do these really random things or struggle through to get to what I need to do. But that's not, now it's a struggle. And so it's not really a fun, functional game to play, right? So I very rarely, if I've played a game and I'm like, this game is just too difficult and it's no fun to play because the accessibility is just too rough to kind of get through, I usually don't even put those up for review. The only time I do is if it says like, accessible, I'll just, make some accessible chess. I'll just make something up. If it says accessible chess or it says blind chess, I will review that even if it's super bad, because it's probably a game you're going to gravitate to from my community because it says accessible or blind, right? So I want to kind of give you the warning that, oh, I did play that. It's actually not all that accessible. Maybe you should consider, steering away from that. So that's the only time I will put up a game that kind of gets a bad rating, just because I think someone might actually gravitate towards it, thinking it's something worth playing. But otherwise, if I play a game and it's a stinker, I don't even waste people's time by putting it up. I want them to go download fun, interesting games to play, not waste a week on some game that no one's going to download because I gave it an F. You know what I mean?
Is there a good accessible chess?
There is. I haven't released the review yet. It's actually one I just played here in the month of December. It's called Chesswise, like chess and then WISE. And it's really great. I mean, it does you can play either from a board standpoint, or if you know the chess annotations, you can just play from an annotation standpoint. You can play against other people around the world, and it seems to have an active community. It's a really good one. I enjoy that. So Chesswise,
Okay.
WISE.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing that I like to play. And
tip for those people who might not know, but on a game like that, that's a grid-based game. go to your rotary menu on your phone, switch to vertical navigation, which allows you to kind of move in the 4 primary directions, which just makes it easier to kind of move around that board and understand where you are in space than having to, swipe right and then, swipe right to get to the next row. I mean, you could just swipe up and down to move up and down the rows.
Okay. That is a good tip. And again, there we go, talking about something that you might not know, but there's a great tip that that folks can use, maybe not just for chess, maybe for other things.
Yeah, for all things. Yeah, that's the other thing about gaming, particularly for someone who's newly lost their sight. Like when you play a game, you're enjoying playing the game and you're learning these gestures without even really realizing, and they're applicable on everything on your phone. The vertical navigation isn't just available in games. It's, in other things that you might be trying to navigate around. So I think it's a great, playing games is great for the blind community for just, applying it to just everything else that you do as well. And when I do these reviews, I will mention, don't forget about the vertical navigation in the rotary. The third button, the developer didn't label it, just says, button. But let me tell you what that button is. That button is the whatever, the sound menu. So I kind of let people know so that when they sit down to play the game, they're not struggling like, oh, what is this button? It just says button. I'm confused. Well, if they read my review, they would already be like, oh, okay, that's this button. I know that's the sound menu. Aaron told me about that in the review. So now I can just keep playing and have fun and not get frustrated. So I try to, tell people about the accessibility, where it's good, where it falls down, and then where it falls down, try to give them ways to work around it if possible, just to make their game experience smoother than maybe what I had when I first sat down with that particular game. And I don't want people to abandon the game maybe too quickly because they get frustrated with something where if you just knew a couple things, you can kind of get around that issue and still play a great game.
And that is something that not just for games, but obviously a lot of apps or a lot of websites that you access on your phone, when you get to that button, and you have, I wonder what all these buttons do. Sometimes you take the time to go through and figure it out. And other times you say, never mind, I'll move on to either a different app or a different site and just go there. And it gets very frustrating at times, I know, for a lot of us. And it doesn't have to be that if the folks who are developing the games or the apps or whatever, take a minute and make sure everything is labeled, or an image J7543.jpg. I wonder what that is. Yeah. And that's right. Exactly. And some of them are, lines and lines and lines of, just, I can't call it code because it's just
a file name
title. Yeah. File name. Right. So.
Yeah, and I try to do that too. When, like, if I have a chance, like, I'm interviewing this developer, and I've played their game, and I know it says the third thing just says button. Like, I'll mention that. And hey, just so maybe you want to label that as sound menu. And they're like, oh, really? Oh, I didn't realize it. They go and do that. So hopefully, by the time someone plays the game, and I'm talking about the third button that's not labeled, it actually by then has been labeled because I've maybe mentioned it to the developer, and hopefully they've updated it. So I'm trying to do some of that behind the scenes stuff as I interview the developers as well. So, and that's the other great thing about when you're interviewing the developers. You might just send off something like, oh, why don't you fix this? And they, may or may not ignore you. But if you're interviewing them, they kind of are like, oh, he's interviewing me and he's going to be talking about my game. Let me just polish this thing up as best as possible, before this interview. I see a little bit more traction on things that I'm mentioning to people like, oh, maybe you want to fix this. Those ones when I'm interviewing somebody, those seem to get fixed a lot quicker.
Is there a developer that you really like because all the stuff they do, or the games are great, or the accessibility is always great? Is there a developer or two that fall into that category?
Yeah, so when I get a question like this, the person that I mention is a guy named Charlie Seligman. He created a game called Swarty Quest, which you might have heard me mention earlier in this interview. It is an open world role playing game, and I started playing that game very early on his release, like maybe a few weeks after he put it on the App Store. And what that game is from when he started to what it is now is drastically different, and that has a lot to do with very early on, he kind of reached out to the blind community and said, hey, I want to make this accessible. What would you like to see? How could I make this accessible? And he just, added sound effects. He added, voice tags. He created a whole auto travel system, because it's a grid that's 50 by 50, and even when you put on vertical navigation, 50 by 50 is pretty big to try to navigate. So he created a whole auto travel to just make it easier to get from one place to the other. He created a relative map legend, which kind of says, okay, you're at X20, Y15, and then it'll tell you where all the other things. Here's a castle at this location. Here, at this coordinates is a cave. At this coordinates is a dragon. So it kind of gave you a sense, even though you can't visually see the map, you can kind of read the legend and understand, okay, this is what's near me. And then, at the top of the list, above me and at the bottom of the list below me, these are the things that are farther away from me, either above me or below me. So it kind of really made it an easier to understand map than swiping through, 250 grid squares trying to figure out, well, where am I and where was that thing? And, now I can't remember. You have this legend that allows you to do it. And then you could, okay, I'm here and I want to pick the cave. Let me double click on that. Let me hit auto travel. And now it'll kind of, over the course of 3 turns, move me over to that square, so I don't have to figure out and do it myself. So those were, just 2 great features, but he added many more along the way to make that game accessible and really listen to the blind community and try to do it. So that is another game that gets a perfect score, and it has a lot to do with the collaboration between the community and the developer, and the developer really going out of his way to put everything in that people were asking for, and putting a lot of hard work to make that game quite exceptional.
Okay, and that game is not developed specifically for the blind community. That is general game, and he has sight, and it's right. He wanted it to work, and really went the extra mile to do it.
Exactly.
But that is outstanding. As you were talking, I'm thinking, have you ever tried to, I know Twitch is huge with games. Have you ever thought about playing games and commenting as you go, or having folks watch you do that? Do you do that?
Yeah, no. So I don't do that. I've kind of decided my niche is the game reviews and the game interviews. And I've made connections with loads of great people who do that type of work, and so I'll be like, oh, I just played this game, and by the way, this guy over here, he has a whole walkthrough series. It's 12 videos. It walks you through all the menus, and go check it out. Here's a link to his playlist on this particular game. So I'll just kind of shout out other people and direct people to who are already doing that work, and probably can do it better than I can. So. Okay.
As I was asking the question, I was thinking, okay, it's probably not simple, which you said you wanted simple and easy, and that's not necessarily.
It's actually not that bad, but you can't be everything to everybody. Right. I have my thing that I do, and I'm happy to tell my community, here's a great person. He does great walkthroughs. Go check that out. And he has a whole series already that he did a month ago about the game I just put a review out for. So go check it out. It's a good supplement to the review that I'm doing. I'll put that right in the review just so they have it, and they can make that connection and hopefully go check out one of those influencers or accessibility content creators work.
Is there anything, as we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to talk about that I didn't ask you about?
I mean, so it's funny, you said, you have 1,700 people. That's great, really great over the 18 months the site's been. I mean, like, I sit there and be like, why is it not 10,000? I feel like it's every blind person who plays a game should be checking out this group, because it's just, let you know about a whole bunch of games that you may not have known about. It has some good, content of, not only the game reviews, but the interviews. So, I hope everyone just kind of who's in your community, give a join to the group, check it out. Besides the stuff that I'm putting out, the community will help out each other. Someone will say, I'm struggling with this in this game. And, you'll get 10 or 15 responses from people in the community who will kind of point you in the right direction and help you with the accessibility, or just help you with the gameplay if you're not understanding. So it's a nice community, very, very friendly, and no toxicity in the group. So please just come check it out. And again, it's all if you got a game that you think is great, mention it to me. And if I haven't reviewed it, I'll put it on the list and get it out so we can share that with the rest of the community.
And the Facebook group is, do you have a facebook.com/group/ do you have mobile accessible games, or do you not have the vanity?
I do have a
URL?
link, which I can definitely share with you. If you search, Facebook, in the little search bar and you put mobile accessible games, it'll come up. It's actually called mobile accessible games. And then in parentheses, for the blind is the actually full title. But if you just search the words mobile accessible games, it should come up. But I will also share with you the social media link so that you can have people just click on it from the description.
How about any place else folks can reach out? Mobile accessible games on Twitter, you had mentioned. What about YouTube? What's your YouTube channel?
So my YouTube channel is just my name, Aaron Spelker. So AARON, S as in Sam, P as in Peter, ELKER. That's where all the interviews are of the game developers and accessibility influencers. You can also see articles at pocketgamer.com. And again, if you search that site for my name, it'll come up with all the articles I've written for them. And again, that covers kind of a gambit of things. It's some about games, some about developers, some about just the benefits of gaming for the blind and visually impaired community. So it covers a wide variety of topics. And again, I feel like the more sites that Pocket Gamer gets on the accessibility content, the more they're going to want to cover it and feature it on their site. So please view that so that they give you even more content.
There you go. And I will put links to all of that in the show notes so you can get there quickly. So don't frantically try to remember, hey, I got to remember how to spell his name. Right. The links will be in the show notes and you'll get right there. Have you ever done, before I let you go, have you ever done live streams on YouTube with the interviews? Are they live or you record them?
I always record them for two reasons. One, I don't know how to live stream, so that goes into the easy and not easy thing.
Okay.
And then two, I feel like live streams, you will have it's going to be Thursday at 8 and I'm interviewing people from really all over the world.
Okay.
People are in Australia and Germany and, the West Coast while I'm on the East Coast. So I can't really say it's going to be a set time. Whenever I can get those people on, I record it. And then I release it every Wednesday, usually at 9 a.m. And you can go out and find the video. But from a recording standpoint, I can never be sure when I'm going to be able to track somebody down.
Aaron, I really appreciate your time today. It's been a lot of great information.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again to Aaron for reaching out and coming on to Blind Bosses and being the first episode of Blind Bosses. And I do have to apologize. When I first recorded that episode with Aaron, well, it wasn't that I first recorded it. When I recorded it back in December, the end of December, I expected that to come out in the next week or so. And listening to the pre-show chatter between the two of us, I told him when it was going to come out, it was going to be episode 212. And I do apologize for that, Aaron. What I was hoping to do was, once I started editing it, I thought this would be a great episode for Blind Bosses. And I thought, okay, I'm going to hold it and I'll wait until I have the intro and I have some other episodes so I can release. The intent was to release one episode of Blind Bosses per week, along with one episode of I Can't See You. Obviously, that didn't happen. In fact, I don't have another Blind Bosses lined up, and I thought, I've got to get this episode out. With everything else I've got going on between website development that I'm doing for a couple of folks and some other things, I just don't have time to record and edit and get 2 episodes out per week. So I thought, it's time to just get this episode out before it gets too old, because there are some things that we talk about in here of things coming out in the first quarter, reviews and things like that. And hopefully they are out by the time you're listening to this, but I didn't want to go too much further. So Aaron, I apologize. And what I've done, and it kind of made me nervous. As I was editing, I was thinking, boy, he doesn't have that domain name, mobileaccessiblegames.com. I bought that domain for him. And if you go to mobileaccessiblegames.com, it will take you to the Facebook page of Mobile Accessible Games. I just didn't want to see someone grab the domain and then him not have it and have to change the names of his Facebook groups and things like that, because that could happen. And as I mentioned in the interview, if Facebook shuts him down at any given moment for whatever reason, then he loses all that stuff and he's got to do a website or something else anyway. So I wish him a lot of luck. He's a really good guy. We spoke for quite a long time after we finished recording, and it was great to talk to him. It was a great idea that he has. I just think a website would be huge with the reviews and things like that. He could get on board with having content from the different developers talking about their items that they're working on, upcoming games and things like that. I just think it would be a great idea. I will put links to the games that he mentioned in the show notes. I am an affiliate for Apple, so they may be affiliate links if I could figure out how to do them that way. I'm not 100% sure, but there will be links to the games. I have to tell you, I've downloaded both the chess game that he talked about, Chess-Wise, and Football Chairman Pro. I've been on the fence for playing that game since I downloaded it because I'm afraid of what it will do to everything else that I have to do. As you heard him say, he spent a lot of time playing that game, and he had other things to do, but it wasn't critically other things he had to do. I've got too many things on my plate to start playing that and get taken away. And that's one reason I love chess, because you can play one game in a fairly short amount of time. If you want to overthink it and go through every possible way you could play and make a move, might take you a little longer. But if you go fairly quickly, a game could take, 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it might be, depending on how hard you're thinking. So that's something that has a pretty simple end time, whereas Football Chairman Pro does not. And I am so into that. So check those games out and the other ones that he's mentioned. I'll also have a link to his book. It'll be in the show notes. I've actually started reading it on Bookshare. I do appreciate Aaron coming on. What a great story he has. And he didn't sit around waiting for something to happen. He went forward with his ideas. And that's one of the things that when you lose your vision, a lot of people don't do. They sit around, they are depressed, they mope around. And sometimes it could be a year, sometimes even longer, that they just can't get it down to, hey, I can't see now. What do I do? I've got to do something. They sit around feeling sorry and again, being depressed. So great job on Aaron for that as well. Show notes are going to be available at ican'tseeyou.com/220. This is episode 220 of I Can't See You. Until I get a lot more episodes, we're just going to put them in the I Can't See You realm. And maybe one day that'll break out, maybe not. But again, ican'tseeyou.com/220. Remember, I Can't See You sounds like a whole sentence, but it's only 7 characters long. ican'tseeyou.com/220. Now, if you are someone who is blind or visually impaired and you own your own business, you're some sort of professional, lawyer, accountant, and in fact, if you're in Pennsylvania and an accountant, we may have a need for you in the NFB of Pennsylvania. Or if you are something else, if you're an actor and have been in some things and doing some productions, I want to hear from you because I want to get you on Blind Bosses. And again, you don't have to be from Pennsylvania. You can be from anywhere in the world. If you've got something going on and you're getting the job done, like Aaron is getting the job done in video game reviews, I want to hear from you. Please reach out. 646-926-6350. You've got up to 3 minutes to leave your information, and I will love to have you on. You can also reach out via email, ican'tseeyouPodcast@gmail.com, ican'tseeyouPodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach me on the socials, at David Benj, DavidBenj, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where you can also listen to all the episodes, like Ziggy. I really do appreciate you joining me for this episode of Blind Bosses, the first. I hope to have more. Be well, stay safe, and I'll talk to you next week.